distraction, the powers that be. And if you spread a hoax, you better make it big. I am sick and tired of this same soundtrack. Why do you dance it when it's a cheap composition by the same authority you wave your mind?
Two reasons why the heliocentric model is false. Two observations, major contradictions that should make you question not just this model, but the world as a whole. Heliocentric means the sun is in the center of the model. Helios is Greek, means sun. Centric, of course, comes from center, and then you have the sun in the center. The planetary system revolves around it, so the sun is considered fixed. Even if it moves then, as they say, through outer space, it is considered the center of the planetary system. Within that model, we have to be aware that we're talking about a model. People learn this as if it was the truth, but it's just a model. You always just have to see it that way in the first place. If anybody tells you about a model, then doesn't mean that it's the truth. Just consider it as a model. And then gather the information and then start verifying the truth of it. But so many people, they just sit in mandatory school, they open them the top of their heads, teachers are pouring information into it, actually a lot of information, so you are basically overwhelmed with all this information. You get tested on it, you think it's true because there is a test, you see, and all you do is just vomit the information that was fed into you, right? So people have to start dissecting that information, okay? Going back and say, okay, what about what we learned is actually true? You see, so many people don't do this. They just run into life. They rush into life. They get out of school and they rush into life. Why? Because advertising makes them like this. It's like they want. They just desire. They want to go for their dreams, you know. Oh, travel the world, or things like this. Or open your business, become an entrepreneur, be the cool guy or the cool girl, you know. And they just go off. They just are being led astray. They never have like a real moment, I believe, where they just sit down, not just a day. You have to sit down really for a year or two to figure certain things out. Because these lies, or the hoaxes that they are telling us like fairy tales, is not so easy actually to see through, you know, because a whole society believes in these things, and they, just like a wave, they build each other up, right? But what they're building each other up into is the lie, you know, within the walls of this lie. So you can have a lot of information about a lie, doesn't make that lie any true. Can know a lot about a lie, doesn't mean that it's true. And then you can seem smart because you know a lot, because you have a lot of information about the heliocentric model, for example, but still doesn't tell whether you're actually talking about truth. And so many teachers in school are being seen as the givers of truth. When that's not the case, they get paid to just propagate whatever is in the curriculum. Okay? And if they haven't woken up themselves, they will not, if they really woke up, they would not be these teachers anymore, you see. But because they have not really woken up to certain things, they're gonna keep on teaching them, just because they get a paycheck at the end of the month, and they themselves think that it's true what they're teaching. That's the whole point. And so we have to get back to truth through physics, through applied sciences, and get away from the science fiction, you see, because that's what it is, science fiction. And so let's get into those two observations. First observation is that within the heliocentric model, the Earth revolves around a fixed sun and then rotates around itself again, and that rotational speed is constant. So when the Earth turns around itself at a constant speed, that means it always comes to the same spot again, and will always to the same time and the same frequency come back to that same spot again. That's what constant speed means. So let's take that and realize that within that model, the Earth could be considered non-rotational. Although it's rotating, it could appear to be as non-rotational, and when then you add the revolution around the sun, you realize that at some point you're facing away from the sun. So for example, in summertime you're facing the sun, then you're revolving around the sun at 90-degree angle, you're already looking away from the sun. And in wintertime, you're looking completely away from the sun. Okay? So we would have to dial back our clocks 6 hours, you see? And this is not something we do in reality. In reality, we are always facing the sun. You can set up a camera and the sun will always appear within that camera frame. Throughout the year, which is called the solar analemma, set up a camera and take pictures every month or every day, and the sun is in a certain spot. And it doesn't leave that frame, so we're always facing the sun. We don't have to dial back our clocks 6 hours in wintertime compared to summertime. So if that doesn't align with the model can be considered false. Another thing is that you have Earth, which is a ball full of mass. It's like metals, stones, mass, you know, a lot of mass, heavy mass. Whereas all the rest is considered little lights in the sky, literally the lights in the sky, because they're light, you see. So it doesn't make sense that everything else is just turning around the sun when the Earth is the heaviest mass in this existence. So that's just additionally, and now let's get to the second point, which is when we look into the sky and the sunrise and the sunsets, then it always appears to people as if the sun is rising and setting, right? The sun is moving. That's how it appears to us. So why do people not take that and say, that's what it is? We can be fine with that. Great. We made an observation and that's it. Why does it have to be something else? You know, why does it have to be turned around? Why does it have to be that the sun is fixed and the Earth is rotating around itself and then the Earth is revolving around the sun? So two motions, very complicated thing. Why can't it just be that the Earth is stationary and the celestial is moving as we perceive it? Of course, the sun always appears for us to be moving, but they tell us that it's the Earth that is rotating. And what we perceive is the contrary. Like reality is supposed to be the contrary of what we perceive it to be. You see what I'm saying? And yes, we have to make a distinction between appearance and reality. But because of another reason, and that's what I wanted to get into with the second point here, second reason. Astronomers that study this stuff and that work in space companies, they calculate for light time delay. And what does that mean? That means that light has a certain speed and it takes some time to get from A to B. Even though on Earth we don't realize it as much when we, for example, we hit the switch in our room and the light turns on immediately. Because the distances are just too small. But when we get to celestial objects, such as the sun, the distances are huge, thousands of kilometers. So it takes some time for the light to reach us. So for example, just as a thought experiment, if the sun turns off, it would take 8 minutes, around 8 minutes, for us to see that effect on Earth. Until the last photon has left the sun and went all the way from the sun to us. Okay? Because it's traveling through space. So if there is an 8-minute delay, that also applies to the movement of the sun. So the sun is moving to the right, from east to west. There is a delay time. And astronomers calculate for this. Because that's the reality. And now here's the thing. This calculation must only be done when the Earth is stationary, non-rotational and fixed, and everything else is rotating around the Earth, which is the reality that the Earth is fixed and the sun and the moon and the stars are rotating. We actually have to calculate delay time because the light sources themselves are moving within the heliocentric model. What does that mean? The sun is not moving, so the light source is not moving. And so when we are on Earth, we can be anywhere on Earth. The Earth could go anywhere. The light is always coming from the same spot. So we wouldn't have to make calculations for delay time. You see? But when we turn it around, which is the reality, that the Earth is fixed and the sun and the moon and the stars are rotating, we actually have to calculate delay time because the light sources themselves are moving. And how can you compare this? Because when I talk about this, I guess you can't quite follow what I'm saying here. So let's have a more day-to-day example. But when you turn it around and you're moving, then you see that there's a delay in the jet stream. And then you see the jet stream bend slightly. You can try this at home if you want. Because then the source of the jet stream is moving. You see, and it makes a huge difference whether the source of the jet stream is moving or fixed. So when it is moving, there is a delay. And you see that the jet stream starts bending, because that's the expression of the delay. And you would have to calculate the delay. And you can apply this jet stream philosophy, if you want to call it, to the light source of the sun. Because light is basically the same, it's a jet stream of light. So if that source is moving, there's a delay time. That jet stream is actually bending. You know, you could imagine it now as a bending jet stream of light. Because the sun is moving. But if the sun was not moving as the false heliocentric model implies, then this would not occur. The jet stream would just stay straight. And the Earth would be moving, but there is no bending going on within the jet stream. And so you would not have to make calculations based on light time. There's a delay from movement, and that's what astronomers are calculating in truth, because that's the truth, you see. you know, it could still be a ball, could still be a geocentric ball, but we have to agree that it's fixed and the celestial is moving. And there is no hideous, okay, we're seeing the sun rising and setting, we're seeing the sun moving, but it's the contrary of that. You know, why do you have to have an upside down theory for this? Why aren't you just fine with that? Why couldn't you just say, okay, that's what it is, right? Because it is what it is. But again, of course, you can think that is different, but then you have to gather evidence, you have to gather information and say, okay, no, it's not actually different. It's not the contrary of how we perceive it, it's exactly how we perceive it. That means the sun is moving. And that contradicts the heliocentric model. That means the heliocentric model is false. That means some other model has to be true. And then we can, for example, take the flat earth theory model, if it's the correct one. You know, there are a lot of deceivers out there who pretend to be flat earth advocates, but they take a wrong flat earth model on purpose and push it to the people, so they have a false idea about what the flat earth model actually is. And then, if you think about it, you can still consider Earth a ball, but geocentric then. But then you have to come up with information to back that, or with reasons or evidence to back that, because the geometries of a ball are strange physically, in a physical sense, when we have, for example, why are people walking upright in Australia, for example? How can oceans stay there? That force should be so strong. Then you have to question why it is so easy for grasshoppers to grow, if that force is so strong, because force means that when you have a light object, it's very easy for that force to draw it to itself, right? To draw it to its source. If there is a force, let's say you want to pick up grocery store bags, then the heavier they are, the harder it is for you to pick them up. So the lighter something is, the easier it will be for you to pull them towards your body, you see, to pull them upwards. So if there is such a huge force that's coming out of the earth, then why are light objects not drawn easily to earth? You see, when a feather falls, it falls slowlier than a stone. So it doesn't make sense at all, right? And then people say, well, it's because of aerodynamics, and that's true. But then if the force was actually independent, gravity, you know, if gravity was a force that is independently coming from the inside of a ball, then that would have to mean that it can easily push a light object through the air, no matter the aerodynamics. You see what I'm saying? Because it's the same with picking up grocery store bags. And I'm trying to find very everyday examples of trying to explain the physics behind these phenomena, behind these, what would you say, behind these problems. Or so just to remember, first one was the Earth cannot be rotating with constant speed around itself because it can be considered as non-rotational within a model. So if the Earth moves 180 degrees around on its orbit around the Sun, it would be facing away at some point. So that's that. And the second one was that if the Sun was fixed within the planetary system, as the heliocentric model suggests, then astronomers would not have to make light time delay calculations. And because they do this in reality, because they have to make that in reality, it's proved basically by NASA themselves, because you can officially look that up on their web pages. It's all public. They tell you the truth, but of course then they run the propaganda program. But the thing is that they have to make calculations for light time delay because the celestials are moving, and that's the truth. The way we perceive it is the way it is, yet the sun appears in a spot inside of our eyes where in reality it is not anymore. Okay, so in reality it has already passed on for 8 minutes more. Okay, so what you see is the 8 minutes delay time, and that's all. But the way you perceive the movement of the sun in the sky, that's just as it is. That means it rises in the east, it sets in the west, and it makes a movement in the sky, and it's the sun that is moving and not the earth.